So our next speaker for the session is Dr. Sam Walkom. Sam's a Senior Research Fellow at AGBU and also a keen AFL enthusiast, and I notice there are a few others in the room from the test questions, so I'm sure that'll be some dinner conversation. Sam's highly involved in the sheep genetic space, has been working in developments such as foot rot breeding values, along many others. He's focused on the development of new traits and the resource flock, working alongside Julius. And today Sam will focus his talk on the work that AGBU have been doing as part of the Advanced Livestock Measurement Technologies Project, or ALMTech as some of you have heard, which is also coming to a close after 7 years worth of investment. So there's some great outcomes to share. So please welcome Sam.
Thanks, Clara. One of the great advantages of doing the fifth talk for the day is that you're going to see lots of plots that have already been shown and lots of stories that have already been told. So I'm just going to build on what we've heard and add a few bits about what we're learning from ALMTech. So this work, we've had a team at AGBU working within the ALMTech project, which is a larger project. So I'd like to acknowledge Raya Alexandri and Daniel Brown, and of course Sarita Guy, who was working in this project before she moved across to MLA. And as you'll hear, this project has not just been done at AGBU, it's been a wide variety of groups involved, and Pete's going to make my talk look like a geneticist's talk and have exciting meat science stuff to talk about. So I'll get through the data stuff first. So basically, we've come a long way in the type of sheep we've been breeding, and we've been able to achieve great genetic gains. There's the plot you've seen already. As you can see, when we knew very little about what we were measuring and selecting for, we did make some mistakes. We weren't aware of that antagonistic relationship between lean meat yield and eating quality. But as more information has come on board, we've been able to change our breeding objective to breed an animal that we're happier with. And that will continue to go through time. And we need to be able to continue to understand how we can understand that genetic variation that exists within our population. And that's somewhat in where ALMTech comes into this. What technologies are we developing that can help us improve our ability to identify that genetic variation and allow us to make genetic improvement? So that's sort of what I'm going to talk about. And as I said, we've started from one point. We got records on farm. That was where we started. We started weighing animals. We then got into ultrasound scanning for fat and muscle depths. Then, as Julie said, we brought into the resource flock and we started to get our animals slaughtered and measured for a wide variety of carcass traits and different measures. And so we're learning more and more about the genetic variation that exists within our animals. And then genomics came along, and that's helped us even identify the animals we haven't killed better. And that's one of the big problems we have with meat science, is that if you want a good phenotype for meat, you have to kill the animal. It's very hard to breed from a carcass. And so we have to move forward. And that's somewhat how AGBU's been involved with the ALMTech project. So Pete may talk a bit more about how Program 2's been involved, but AGBU was part of Program 4 within the Advanced Livestock Measurement Technology. So the principle of this project was, can we get technologies in the abattoir so that we can identify carcasses and make better decisions and remove wastage on our carcasses and improve the quality of the carcasses? And if that technology is going to be available, how can we take advantage of that new information coming in? And that's where Program 4, which Daniel's been leading, has taken on board. So our goal has really been, with this new technology coming in and the new data, what can we do to use that as part of our genetic evaluation and take advantage of that? So that's what I aim to present on today. So we'll start with the easy one, lean meat yield, and maybe a few of you have already gone and got some of your animals, or your clients have had animals killed and measured with DEXA. So DEXA is probably a shining light for this project and our major commercialised technology. DEXA is hugely advantageous to what we have had currently in our ability to measure lean meat yield. To get a CT measure of lean meat yield, the animal would have to be killed, then it's usually cut up into thirds, and it's taken from the abattoir out to U&E and run through a CT machine several weeks, days later after the kill. It's very costly, it's very time consuming, and it's a long way behind to your selection decision. So DEXA can be done at chain speed now and has been implemented in several plants and will probably be implemented in more. The second technology, which is not as advanced as DEXA unfortunately, has been microwave technology. where we can use microwaves to get a measure of sea site fat on the lamb carcass, or the live animal. So that is probably a little bit further behind in DEXA. They're going through accreditation at the moment, but that you can see has huge advantages because it's a handheld device that you could be using on farm eventually, hopefully. So huge advantages there. So what's that mean from a genetic evaluation point of view? Well, we've done some analysis. As of February this year, we've had over 4,000 animals within the sheep genetics population that have been recorded for DEXA. So we have a DEXA measurement on these animals to record a lean meat yield. So we've analysed that using the standard sheep genetics model. I can show you equations, but someone told me today that the moment you put an equation into a presentation, everyone stops listening, so I haven't done that. And I kept it very simple. If we compare DEXA, our new technology's measurement of lean meat yield, to what we see when we used our gold standard, CT, we can see that the heritability of the two traits is pretty similar. We're capturing the genetic variation within those populations equally no matter what technology we use. We also see a strong genetic correlation between the two technologies of about 0.85. So whichever technology you're using, you're identifying the same trait for CT and DEXA. So we're both measuring lean meat yield. Of course, it's never really going to be one because there's slight differences in the technology, but that's pretty promising. To highlight how strong that holds up, we can see that the relationship between our lean meat measure, no matter what technology we use, holds up with eye muscle depth, fat depth, and IMF. So what we're looking like is we've got two technologies measuring the same trait, and we can use this the data from both technologies into our evaluation. And that's what we're doing at the moment. We're looking at how we can implement this DEXA information into your sheep genetics ASBVs, and it will be driving the lean meat yield ASBVs, sorry. So that's good. So DEXA, as we said, is a bit of a shining light. This all started back at the start of ALMTech, where we got the first DEXA unit at Bordertown, and then over the 7 years, we've now got it at 6 sites across Australia. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware that all these sites have it. I must note that these are not all at the same level of commercialisation at the moment, and so some of these are still just recently developed and trying to work out what they're going to do with the data, whereas as we can see, Gundagai is leading the pack a little bit at the moment. So DEXA is being implemented in chains, and this data is going to be coming available to you and your clients quite quickly. If I move along to Program 2, and Pete will talk a lot about this as he's the lead of Program 2, we can see that there's multiple technologies to understand IMF. Again, the principle and the advantage of these technologies is they're rather quick in their measurement recording, as you can see in those two videos for MEQ and SOMA. You can see that we're going to get phenotypes much quicker than current methods where we have to take it to the lab, chemically pull out this fat from the muscle and calculate it. So MEQ, as we know, or some people are aware, is commercialised in several plants and data is being provided. Pete will go a bit further into how these are progressing, but as you can see, there's a couple other technologies that have pros and cons compared to MEQ, but they should be commercialised in the near future. So much as the DEXA, we start to look at this data on sheep genetics animals and see how they play out. So if we start with MEQ, note that we're a bit further behind than DEXA, so we don't have as many records for MEQ as we do see for DEXA. So this is a, let's say slightly less accurate result, but the results, again, as with DEXA, are highly promising. We see very similar heritability estimates across our gold standard, or the current trait recording method you use now, and the new technology, in this case MEQ. In this case, we had a correlation of 0.95 between the two traits. And we do see a little bit different here, but please note the error bars, so I wouldn't read much more into it than these technologies, again, looking promising. SOMA, slightly different data set to the MEQ, but we do see, again, that nice, strong genetic correlation between our technology and our gold standard of chemical IMF, and we see similar heritabilities. So again, as we saw with DEXA, we've got these technologies starting to record on animals. much quicker, have huge benefits, and we can see that they're holding up very strongly with the traits we've got, and the aim is to, in the short term, implement them into our genetic evaluation and influencing our SPVs. As you can see, a little bit further behind in the implementation of these technologies, primarily because some of them are still going through accreditation, but some of them, as you can see, are handheld devices, and Pete will show just how easy they are to use. So we expect that they'll start to go into commercial plants quite quickly. So what we've now got is these new technologies that are going to help us to understand the genetic variation in our population and overcome probably the biggest problem we have with a lot of our meat science traits is they take a long time to get available and they're quite costly. So we can cut both those down. And so likely we're going to get a lot more data and maximise our genetic gain in the future. So going back to my story at the start, we started off with our on-farm recording and that drove our ASBVs. Then we got access to resource flocks, we submitted key RAMs, we started to understand a bit more meat science stuff, and as Julia showed, we got a change in our EBVs and accuracy. That's helped drive the value of our genotyping within our population because we're related to the reference population and got more success. But now we have this new advantage is we've got technologies that's going to give us performance records for key, harder to measure traits a lot quicker. And so historically it's been very, very expensive to think about doing your personal progeny testing for meat science traits. Pete's a pretty expensive man, he's got a good hourly rate. So it's a bit expensive, but with this new technology, you're going to get feedback a lot quicker and a lot faster. And as we've discussed it several times, depending on your production system, there is potential that if you can get your lambs off quick enough, you could have carcass data back before you make your lambing decision. So there's a huge capacity for this new technology to shift our information and accuracy of young sires. I will quote, and we asked about how important phenotypes is. Even in this genomic world, phenotypes still remain the king, and don't ever stop recording. That's my comment. So future challenges, we've got a few left. Life isn't easy. You solve one problem and you move on to the next one. The first one is really this eating quality question. At the moment, we've just given you new tools to select on traits you've already got. So the question is, are we really improving eating quality and can we go further? So as we're all aware, the resource flock has driven the information we have on consumer testing, and that's where the consumers judged a heap of different size progeny for eating quality, including tenderness, flavour, likeness, and then that data's become available. So some work by Sarita Guy with Andrew and Daniel was presented at World Congress in 2022. And as you can see, we were able to find that the eating quality of the loin and the top side was heritable. So there is genetic variation in eating quality of different size. And so there is potential to improve that alongside the traits we're already improving. I'm a geneticist, so I'm going to show a table with lots of numbers on it. That's what we do. But I've kept it very simple. Well, Sarita did. I borrowed it. The genetic correlation of one is a dark blue. So as we can see, between our different measures of eating quality, within a cut or a region, so the loin or the top side, they're strongly correlated. So we're not likely to see animals that are good for tenderness but not for flavour. We do see a little bit of a slightly lower correlation when comparing eating quality in the two cuts. So overall, highly correlated, but there is a little bit of variation to play with. So this is probably a next area to go. We can start to look into producing breeding values that add to our story and look particularly at eating quality. So that's something that's on the agenda of future work. The big, elephant in the room is as good as program 1 and 2 were, we still haven't been able to get a new technology for shear force. It remains probably the hardest trait to measure out of the batch and takes the longest because we do need to cook the samples and then measure them for tenderness. A lot of people, well, the story I'd like to say is when we knew how to measure for lean meat yield and select for it, we selected for it. and then we got a disadvantage in our IMF. When we fixed that, we were selecting for IMF and lean meat yield. The story is important because what we've found is that shear force is also important. Selecting purely on lean meat yield and IMF will lead us into a path with shear force potentially, because we only really have a moderate correlation between IMF and shear force. And so you can have a high IMF piece of lamb that's quite tough. And so ignoring shear force could be a little bit of a problem. So we still need to measure shear force, and unfortunately at the moment that's resource flock trait. That is a hard to measure trait, has to go through meat science. We don't have a new technology like we are getting with DEXA and MEQ and those sort of things for the other two traits. So this is really an area we still haven't been able to answer. I don't know if any of you breeders are going to turn into scientists and want to take on a meat science career, but if you do, this is the area to go in, and we'd love you to work in there. So can we get a technology to capture tenderness in the abattoir and give you that faster feedback on shear force? The final one, and it is probably why my hairline's going backwards, not forwards, is the quality of data. And we are changing in this move to getting new technology in the abattoir is that we've now added a third party into your data story. At the moment, with a lot of your on-farm traits, you record them, you submit them. At the moment, when we move into using these technologies, you've got a processor recording it. In that time, you've also got an animal that gets its head cut off and its ear tag moving away from the carcass. So the ability to control data is quite important. So in our evaluation of DEXA, we found out that, several kills, variation between carcasses is looking pretty good. Nothing wrong there. But if we look at it closely, in 3 of the kills, we stuffed up the ID number. We just put the carcass 2 or 3 numbers different. And you can see that the heritability has plummeted. We were able to chase that back because thankfully it's a resource flock kill and Pete's got several different carcass measures at the same time, so you can identify it quite quickly. But are you going to have that available? I don't know. So it's very important that you continue to maintain that data quality, which you're all aspiring to do with the other traits, but with moving into these new technologies and bringing in a third party, you've always got to be careful. So that's some of the issues that we need to work around with. So that's me. I've tried to keep it on time and not hold us back from Pete's great talk, so happy for any questions.
Thanks, Sam. And there's been some really good questions that have come through. There's a couple here that Pete might also be able to touch on in the next session, but about uptake of DEXA with multiple abattoirs and how well are these operators using these new technologies?
That's a good question, and I'm probably, out of all the people here that work on this project, the worst one to answer that question. There has been an uptake. I think you can see with Gundagai they've really taken on as part of their business model. Some of the other ones probably not as well. But I think over time, as producers, you start to ask for that information on your carcasses, and your clients do, abattoirs will just have to get on board. That's me. And Geelong, and if you're going on Friday night, I'll see you there.
I think we'll just ask this one here, Sam. Is the strong correlation between shear force and flavour expected when the relationship with IMF and shear force is not as high?
It does sound a little bit different, but as you could see, the relationship between flavour and tenderness was very, very high. So that's almost 1. And so shear force is really driving that tenderness aspect, and that's why we're seeing that stronger relationship with shear force.
So this last question here is, phenotype is king, but a TSU is much easier. How can we motivate ongoing phenotype collection?
We were at a meeting the other day, and the question was, how do we get people to do more phenotyping? I think, from my point of view, we want people who like phenotypes and see the value of phenotyping to do more phenotyping. If you don't really enjoy phenotyping and you don't do a good job at it, and it's low quality, should we really be telling those people not to use a genotype-only tool? It could be just as good and will be better potentially in the future. For those people that are really at the forefront and wanting to identify genetic variation, phenotype is really important. It's your ability to find variation outside of what we would classify with what's observed within the resource flock. So that's my sort of view. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Sam, and thanks for your talk today.